Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Geopolitical Cousins. This is part one of the Trade Value Leader Index column, whatever you want to call it. Marko and I bring our top 30 leaders. We go back and forth. Part two will be digesting the list and arguing about whether we were right or wrong. Please, we want your feedback. Email me at jacob@jacobshapiro.com or Marko@geopoliticalalpha.com. Or you can, if you just do me, I'll also make sure that Marko is CC'd. We want your feedback on this list. It'll be controversial. We want the controversy. It's great. Take care of the people you love. Cheers and see you out there.
Finally, after a long delay due to, life, reality, Israel, Iran, all that stuff, we're finally going to do a trade value list for basically global leaders. So this is based on, as many things of our podcast are, on the Bill Simmons podcast, and he does this NBA trade value list where he basically looks at the top 50 players in the NBA and tries to establish their trade value. This doesn't mean who's the best player in the world. It's just that who would you trade for who? So the player that's number one on this list would be untradeable. Effectively, if any team called you and said, hey, we want this guy, you would say no. Now, that's a combination of age, of salary, and skill, because, of course, somebody who's like, let's say, 39 years old and extremely good, but paid a bunch of money may not be that untradeable. Similarly, somebody who's ranked 10th on this list, it would mean that everybody ranked 1 to 9, you would absolutely trade that player for those top 9. So in the context of politics, it means that, let's say that the prime minister of your country that you live in is ranked 23rd on our list, you would absolutely drive your prime minister to the airport, pack your bag, and ship them for anyone above, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here. Now, a couple of things I want to say before we start as an introduction. First of all, I'm a big believer in the Warren Buffett quote, I try to invest in businesses that are so wonderful that an idiot can run them. Sooner or later, one will. And so I think both you and I, Jacob, I think we agree that fundamentally our framework for thinking about geopolitics is that we try to invest in countries that are so wonderful that an idiot can run them, because sooner or later one will. So replace company with country, and you get a little bit of a taste of what we do. So this is kind of unnatural in a way, because I think that our you and I both kind of have a bias to maybe de-emphasize leadership, me maybe more than you. Doesn't matter. The point is we're doing this for fun. Okay, this is cool. It's fun. We're going to get to rank politicians around the world. I mean, that's kind of cool. The other thing I want to say is that this is not necessarily just about current performance. I think it's also about the future. So we're projecting, and that's what the trade value that Bill Simmons does with basketball players is also about the future. That's why he will often rank younger players higher than those who are already mature and have already sort of been priced in.
Yeah, that was actually, I thought that was the hardest part of developing my own list, was thinking about like the future of different leaders. Because if it's just like you're trading one for today, it's like that's a different conversation than sort of the future. So I'm curious to see where we land on that.
Okay, a couple of more things that I want to say. 4 points I want to make before we start, just to orient ourselves. First of all, we are trying to rank policymakers across different countries, right? And so when I kind of floated this idea to a bunch of my friends I respect, they say, well, that's impossible. Running Greece is such an incredibly different job from running the United States of America. So how can you possibly compare Prime Minister Mitsotakis with, President Trump? What we're assuming here is that there is something inherent about leadership, something truly universal. And of course, Machiavelli wrote The Prince specifically to elucidate some of those universal qualities. It wasn't just about how to be a good prince in Italy, in an Italian city-state, although he did have chapters at the end kind of tucked in later about that. It was really about something that's inherent to being a leader of other men and women in a country. So our primary definition here of a successful policymaker is somebody who takes on the material constraints of their context and sees to successfully overcome them. So this is about bending time, space, altering reality. And this is very unnatural to me, Jacob, because I'm such a hard-nosed believer that ultimately material constraints matter so much more than anything else. And I'm basically arguing here, I want to pick those leaders who take those material constraints and overcome them. Second, it also means that small country policymakers may have an advantage here, as they will often be the ones that have more obviously overcome their disadvantages. And you'll see that certainly in my list. I don't know if that was the case with yours. I don't know if you potentially found that as well. And by the way, we don't know each other's lists, so this is probably going to be a complete shit show. Just to be clear, like this, I'm guessing we will have no alignment. At least Bill Simmons is using statistics. You know, when he says this basketball player averages this or that, he knows how much the contracts are and so on. Third,
well, no, but I listened to your prompt. You had a couple of things that I needed to keep in mind, so I bet we'll land closer than you think. But
I hope so. So let's go to that prompt. We have a loose hierarchy of how we measure one's performance. So this is like statistics for a basketball player that Bill Simmons uses. Here's what we're using. First, approval rating by the public. It's kind of like points per game. It's a little bit of an empty calorie stat. You know, you can have good stats on a bad team. Populists obviously have great popularity early in their term because they're giving candy to the people. Nonetheless, we all believe that on some level, the median voter is wise. And well, at least I do. I know Jacob is less so.
Yes, I think the median voter is a moron. I will take that position against you every time.
That's maybe the only thing where you're more elitist than I am, you know. So, but that's interesting. The second
Come at me, median voters. I think you're all idiots. I will take the House against all of you.
We need the median voter to reach escape velocity on this podcast. Economic performance of the country is the next. I mean, you know, it's objective. We can measure it. Again, it can be juiced up by populists, but we're trying to do our best, especially relative to the peers, by the way. That's where it matters. Geopolitical performance in terms of building alliances, projecting power, navigating a complicated neighborhood, sidestepping landmines that are out there, choosing China versus America, trying to balance them. That's important. Finally, military performance could be in there too. That could be critical for some leaders like Bibi and Zelensky. However, I think it's very difficult to personalize that. I'm not sure to what extent they're actually doing anything on the front lines. So just keep that in mind. Finally, I just want to remind everyone the whole point of this is very simple. Would you trade this leader for somebody else? That's the point. If you are in a particular country, who would you trade the person who leads your country for someone else? Now, finally, last setup before we go into it, we have, I think it's, 30. We're going to do a list of 30, and we have several categories that we're going to try to smush our leaders in. First of all, the bottom rank. And by the way, if you're in the top 30, you're good. So I don't want to hear anyone complaining like, oh, you made so-and-so number 28. Yeah, there's like 190 sovereign countries in the world, all right? Like if you're on our list, you're not doing poorly. So the bottom part of our list, we call it product of a system or a situation. You know, is this somebody who's just like, I mean, clearly the country's doing well, but we're not sure if we should really give them the credit. So that's why they're in this bottom line. Then we go to flawed but effective. I felt like we should have a category for those leaders who have some problems with their track record, like human rights. You know, like, this is one of those like sections, but they're still effective. So that's that one. Then we have some unproven gems. I wanted a category. This is where, like, you know, they look like they're really good, but it's too early to tell. Then diamonds under pressure, miracle workers. These are leaders that are really taking their country and massively outperforming expectations. Then untradeable, unless, right? So these are leaders that you would not trade unless somebody called you from the top 5 or top 6 or however many you have, which is, I'm hanging up the phone right now. That's the last category. That means that if you had a chance to trade these and somebody calls you and says, hey, can we take this number 1 policymaker? You would say no, hanging up the phone. Okay, Jacob, I think that's it, right?
I think you did a great job. We're also going to do some honorable mentions too, right? To start, people that were on the bubble but didn't quite make the list.
Well, let's do that at the end.
Or you want to do it at the end? Okay, I thought
Yeah,
we would go bottomed up, but we can do it at the end too. That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah. Just because then you get a chance to explain why some of those honorable mentions didn't make it on the list, right?
Yeah, you're right, and that way we don't give away some ones that are not going to be on the list. So I'm with you.
All right, cool. So first, I'm going to start off with this. With my, I actually, so Jacob, in these categories, I ended up doing just 5 each. So there's 6 categories, 5 each. But if you didn't, that's totally cool. We're going to start off with products of a system in a situation. First, I want to shout out to Finland and Switzerland. They're well-run places that don't really seem to need anybody to be in charge. I would have loved to put the president of the Swiss Confederation onto this list, but they change it every year, and so it doesn't really matter. Switzerland just chugs along. And perhaps because Switzerland is such a well-run place, and yet nobody really knows who's in charge of it, perhaps that more than anything illustrates the complete vacuousness of this effort. Switzerland has solved the problem by not needing anybody to lead it. But anyways, the 26 to 30, in no particular order, but I'm going to start from the last. Donald Tusk of Poland. Luka Doncic at 29 of Slovenia. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. My bad. Robert Golob of Slovenia at 29. Lawrence Wong of Singapore at 28, although he could have also been in the too fresh to know, too soon to tell category. Ulf Christensen of Sweden and Mette Frederiksen of Denmark. So as you can see, a lot of advanced OECD sort of wealthy places that are just well run. I can't tell if it's the leadership or not. The case for Donald Tusk, cover of The Economist, probably occurs. Poland's kind of riding high. There's a lot of Poland hype out there. I think I have a gut feeling he's a superior commission president than president of Poland, than prime minister of Poland. But that's just me. Why did I put Slovenia here? Just crushing it. Golob came out of nowhere. New movement, kind of the Emmanuel Macron of Slovenia, has done really well. Popularity is down a little bit, but generally the economy and Slovenia are doing extremely well in their neighborhood. Lawrence Wong, has been in power really since May 2024, so not that new. His speech after April 2nd tariff announcement was probably the best pushback, and you would not have expected that to come from Singapore, which usually tries to have a low profile. So his speech against those tariffs was really, really impassioned and excellent. Ulf Kristersson, why is a Swedish prime minister here? Well, very complicated coalition actually with Swedish Democrats that they've navigated extremely smoothly. So this is the far-right populist party. Obviously, NATO membership, lots of things going on. Generally, I think that's very impressive. And then finally, Mette Frederiksen, handling of Trump, number one. I think that this whole Greenland thing didn't take the bait. She's done great, and I think that was a really good performance. So those are my 26 to 30 in reverse order.
Gotcha. All right. Mine was 25 through 30. So I put an additional person in this category. So mine weren't 5 per category. I moved things around a little bit. And I really struggled with the system thing because I could put too many people in the system thing. So I sort of this is my all flawed but serviceable almost category, all smushed, because I couldn't figure out how to make the system thing work with the rest of the list, which is probably my own thing. It's interesting too, by the way. I'll tell you that Lawrence Wong will make an appearance much higher on my list. I think you're under indexing future potential in that pick. This is somebody who years down the road, I like him, and he's already done some other stuff, not just as president. He was the one who helped design some of Singapore's pandemic policy, sort of behind fiscal policy. He's calm, he's globally fluent. I asked ChatGPT to give me a scouting report on him based on a basketball player, and it spit back at me high efficiency governance in a clean package, like a macroeconomic Kyle Korver. I'm happy to get Kyle Korver with that. So anyway, he's much further on my list. But here's where I'll go from 30 up to 25. At 30, I'm going to put in Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia. He's actually made a ton of missteps, and the civil war with the Tigrays has been very destructive, I think. Before that, though, Ethiopia was a darling of emerging markets, and I think he is trying to forge an Ethiopian national identity. So in terms of like scale of not scale, like degree of difficulty. I think he's had a really, really hard thing, and he is trying to do something that is unprecedented in Ethiopian history and maybe even in African history. So I put him on the list for there. 29, we get Paul Kagame in Rwanda. He almost dropped off the list because getting kind of old, and there's some other things happening now. It sort of seems like we're doing another version of the Congo Wars. Is he really going to have the stamina? But think about where Rwanda was before Paul Kagame, and think about where it is right now. He's on the list for me. At 28, I had Emmanuel Macron. He would have been much higher, except that he's a lame duck. He won't be here for much longer. So if this were 2017, probably would have put him higher up. He's got lots of problems. He wears thin domestically. Nobody actually likes him. So he thinks strategically and tries to do lots of things. And I appreciate how he tried to go against France's constraints, failed in a lot of different ways. But hey, you get points for trying. But he's low on the list because not that much time left for him. Right next to him at 27, I'll throw in Friedrich Merz. I'm not really sure what to make of him quite yet. His first steps out of the gate were not great. Didn't get the chancellorship on the first vote. Those were basic blocking and tackling errors that made me skeptical. So I've thrown him in there. He made it to the top of Germany, but timing, lots of different things to say there. And then rounding out my top two for this category at 26, I've got Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Egypt. Dictator strongman, probably doesn't transport to a lot of different geographies well, but as a military strongman has done a remarkable job in a sort of powder keg of a country with 120 million plus people, which was on the verge of going to the Muslim Brotherhood. And at 25, I'll throw in Ilham Aliyev in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has gone from strength to strength. They won the Nagorno-Karabakh war. They're punching significantly above their weight, from economic performance doing extremely well. He's this far down on the list because he's ultimately a resource autocrat. So I'm not sure that Aliyev's game travels very much, but it's perfect for Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan has done so well compared to, say, its neighbor Armenia or some others in the South Caucasus that I think he warrants inclusion in this category. So there's my 30 through 25.
So Ethiopia 30, Rwanda 29, France 28, 27 I missed. Sorry, I didn't put it
Friedrich
down.
Merz, Germany.
Oh yeah, Germany.
Yeah.
Interesting. You have, okay. I struggled myself with Ali. I thought of adding him as well, and I think that's an interesting one. The other ones do make an appearance for me as well, except for Egypt's Sisi. He doesn't. Just that I don't know what to make of it yet. Obviously navigating post Arab Spring is a big deal. So maybe I feel bad now that he's not on my list.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget how chaotic things were in Egypt 2013, 2014, but Mohammed Morsi was there, the Muslim Brotherhood was ascendant, Mubarak and the military had been discredited, and then boom, this guy just comes in, goodbye Muslim Brotherhood, goodbye Arab Spring, we're just going back to military dictatorship. Again, that doesn't travel particularly well. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is not winning any democratic elections. That's why he's but in terms of would you want him in charge of the machinery of state? Yeah, he has shown himself to be a stable hand, at least when it comes to that.
Okay, good. The other thing that I would say is that product of a system, I think you chose a lot of people that actually I have higher, because I'm not sure that anyone can be really a product of Ethiopia or Azerbaijan. Those are very difficult places to rule. So the fact that you have them this slow is interesting. I chose leaders who it's difficult for me to assess whether they are performing well or whether they're just running really well-run countries. And so that's where, that's where Lawrence Wong or Mette Frederiksen. Mette Frederiksen has done a really admirable job in Denmark on many different fronts, but particularly with the ascendancy of Donald Trump, the way that they've handled that. On the other hand, Frederiksen is running Denmark. How difficult is really that? So that's where...
Well, yeah, and I think this is one of the most difficult things in this exercise is to try and compare across things, because I had her much higher too. Both she and Lawrence Wong for me are in the I'm hanging up in 30 seconds. So I'll think about it, but for me, they're high functioning technocrats or elite lieutenants, the sorts that I would sort of trust. If you put Mette Frederiksen in charge of Ethiopia, she might do some really interesting things. And I think I think the other thing about democracies is I think we don't want to underestimate how difficult it is to get to the top echelons of democratic power. It's a different skill set than, say, a Paul Kagame or something like that. But like somebody who's gotten to the top of Denmark and is crushing it, like that to me, like has. And if you get to the top of the Singapore system, like that to me is telling me that you have some political credentials that could follow. Whereas some of the others in this category, like I think they are flawed but serviceable statesmen and stateswomen. They have a low ceiling, but if you just plugged them in, yeah, they would give you some stability. So like if you're in, I don't know, let's think of a really screwed up country. If you're in like Kazakhstan is maybe a bad example, but if you're in a country, let's talk Vietnam. Like Vietnam has been in the midst of a power transition back and forth for a couple of years right now, and you came and said, "Here, I'll trade you like Mette Frederiksen." You'd be like, "Yeah, I'll take Mette Frederiksen." That sounds great to me. So
cool. Okay, well, I'm glad that you didn't think that my list was overly indexed to Europe, because you have at least Frederiksen there too.
I do, although I did not have Donald Tusk, and Slovenia is not on my list just because I'm not up to date on Slovenia. Sorry, guys. But Donald Tusk and Ulf Christensen, like I considered them, but they did not make my list overall.
Okay, good. But I'm glad you considered them at least. That's I struggled really with this category at the end. It was sort of like, you could have gone a lot of different ways. I thought about Ethiopia myself and Egypt. So good. So far, so good. Nothing that we really disagree with, right?
No, the only thing is like I think Lawrence Wong for me is much, much higher on my list. Okay. But everything else, I'm with you.
All right, cool. Okay, well, let's go to the next one, which is flawed but effective. And I felt that several of your picks really, for me, fit into this category. In fact, I have two. I have two that you picked a little bit higher because I see them as flawed but quite effective. So I start off at 25. For me, 25, obviously, you picked 6, I picked 5. I start off with Erdogan. So I have him on my list pretty low. I suspect we might have some disagreement on this because I know, of course, that you hold Turkey and its geopolitical potential in high regard. But I'm almost penalizing Recep Tayyip Erdogan because of that, because I feel that he should have done much better with what he has working for him. I don't feel that Turkey has really moved, to expand its sphere of influence. And yes, I understand that you've been pointing out its gains in the Middle East. However, the true, I think, sphere of influence that Turkey should be crushing is, as it always has been, between the Danube and the Aegean. That is where Turkey should be projecting power. The other issue is that economy has been mismanaged. It just absolutely has been. Now, there's been incredible improvement over the last 2 years, but that's because it started off with a low base. And unlike Javier Millet, who you can reward for the last 12 months of orthodox policies, you can't really reward Erdogan for shifting towards more orthodoxy when he was the one that implemented unorthodox policies in the first place. So I have him pretty low on this list. I'll fly through my other 4 really quickly, and then I got Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, 24. Yep. Pretty much for all the reasons that you said, so I don't want to kind of waste time on that. I think the one thing that maybe you didn't mention is maneuvering between Turkey, Russia, and Europe. The fact that somehow magically Azerbaijan has been able to transit Russian natural gas into Europe and not get into trouble for it. Well done. Slow clap for Aliyev. Very well done.
And decent relations with Iran, decent relations with Israel, like really like some upper level statesmanship.
By the way, we've lost all our Armenian friends. I will not be allowed back into Glendale or my adopted hometown of Montreal. So I apologize to all my Armenian friends who are listening to. But if you are honest with yourself, you will concede. You'll bow down your head in silent moment of despair and agree that Azerbaijan has been blessed with relatively effective leadership. Although, yes, as you pointed out, Jacob, we have to note that, of course, it's easy to run a country whose wealth is greased by commodity exports. So that's
but they're in a difficult neighborhood. To our Armenian friends, like I think any of you would trade your leadership for the leadership of the Aliyev family. I think that's
well. And by the way, if you disagree, tell us. Tell us if you would. But from speaking to my Armenian friends and from observing Armenia, like the leadership vacuum has been pretty significant. So I agree with you. 23rd on my list, Anwar Ibrahim.
Good one.
Malaysia. First of all, if there is one person on this list who has adopted just like that ability to resurrect themselves, reinvent themselves. God bless Ibrahim. He's a survivor. Clearly, he has been in and out of court. He's been attacked by the elites in Malaysia. He's done a lot of different things. I also think that he has handled Malaysian geopolitics excellent since 2022. And also during the financial crisis, remember, he was in charge, and Malaysia did escape most of that East Asian crisis back now 30 years ago. So he's done really well. Emmanuel Macron is on this list for me, flawed but effective. Again, it's difficult because I feel like most of our French listeners will just say, like, you guys are smoking crack. Nobody likes him, as you said. But look, here's the case for Macron. He's managed to build a centrist coalition out of nothing. He's stayed in power a long time. And I think he's fallen short of a lot of the things that he's done domestically. But generally speaking, I think the fact that he usurped the two-party system in France, like with his bare hands, is impressive. And finally, I have Paul Kagame, right? Flawed but effective. Now, you have Paul Kagame 29th. I have him 21st. Astonishing economic development in Rwanda. I think we all agree with that. I think the focus on healthcare and education, wow. Like, right? This is the Singapore economic model just imported into Rwanda. Like, well done. Obviously, on and off supporting insurgency in Congo. Not sure what the winner gets, but sure. And obviously, troubled domestic track record. One of those domestic track records where, like, you may not be able to retire, if you know what I mean. And that's not sure that was necessary. That's it.
Yeah, no, I think he belongs on the list. If he were 10 years younger, he'd be higher on my list. Like, my including him at 29 is just about an age thing, and he's been around for a long time, and eventually things are going to run out. But I think you're right, and I think he's been masterful in the way he interfered with Congo. Like, I mean, when you think about where Rwanda was in the mid 90s and how he, strategically positioned Rwanda into a real force to be reckoned with against much larger countries around it, I think he deserves it. I think we should spend just a second. I should have had Anwar Ibrahim on this list, and I don't have him on the list. That's a mistake on my part, though. I needed to make room for him, and I didn't. So I take your point there. Erdogan is not that much higher for me. I'll give away that he was number 16 on my list. Again, here, though, this is more about his age. Like, Erdogan is at the end of his career, sort of like a Hall of Famer on their last leg. So he's still dangerous. He's still got some punches to throw, but there's not a whole lot left, I think, of Erdogan. I think your shorts. No, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
I think you're short selling a little bit of his accomplishment, because his main accomplishment is to take when he became mayor of Istanbul, in what was that, late 90s, I forget the exact year. Turkey was truly a divided country, where you had the liberal, secular, cosmopolitan, we're going to drink raki and sit on the Bosphorus and eat fish crowd, versus the central Anatolian, conservative heartland, looked down upon by the cosmopolitans in Istanbul. And Erdogan has forged a coherent country out of both of these. He put the Anatolian conservatives not completely in power. It's not like he's completely dismantled the cosmopolitanism of Istanbul and all the things that have made whoever controls the Bosporus an incredibly important trading partner and all these other things, but he's integrated them into the economy. And he's shown an incredible amount of economic flexibility in doing so. Remember, this is the guy who was giving me all the IMF reforms in the late 2000s into the early 2010s, like doing all the things by the book. But then when he needed to grease the wheels and to secure arrangements with all of these different parts of society, sure, let's do a little state-led, autarky, and let's make sure that the right people are in control of the right industries. And if that means I have unorthodox monetary policy, so be it. I'll just call up my friends in Saudi Arabia, and I know that they'll bail me out because they don't want me as an enemy. I'm worse to them as an enemy as anything else. So I think he's reaching the end of his rope. I think you can see that, in arresting and imprisoning Imamoglu. Like, I don't think that's going to age well. You can see he's trying to maybe position sons or sons-in-laws or like other like all these things I think are not going to go well for him. But I think Turkey is in a much more powerful and economically prosperous situation than it was before. And I think he really threaded the needle on a country that very easily could have gone, in a different look at other countries in the Middle East and how they dealt with conservative, more Islamic aspects of society, and the way he was able to forge something coherent out of that. I mean, let's not invoke Ataturk, but hey, he's at least doing a good impression.
Okay. So,
I think my entire first six were all flawed but serviceable. So I think what you should do next is you should read your next category, and then I'll do my next category because I don't want to get in front of your categories, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. But do you want to restate your next five, or?
I think you should state your next, and
Okay.
then I'll follow on behind you. I think that's
Got it.
if we're keeping up with categories, that's what's going to line up best.
Okay, cool. So the next one is Unproven Gems. Correct?
Yes, although this wasn't make the G20 photo, or is this Unproven Gems?
This is the Unproven Gems.
Oh, okay. I had make the G20 photo, but that's fine. It's all still good. Yeah.
Okay, so I stopped at 21. And by the way, so my last one was Paul Kagame. You know a lot about frontier markets that I don't really follow very closely. So I'm very glad that you've kind of confirmed that was a good pick. I'm glad we're aligned on that. All right, Unproven Gems. Unproven Gems for me are basically kind of like, lots of potential out there. I start off with Anthony Albanese in Australia. Done well so far. Very difficult situation. I'm more isolationist to the United States. There's the AUKUS review. He's trying to pivot Australia away from what was extremely unipolar, basically worldview. It was really the only country, I think, on the planet that just decided like world is bipolar. China, US is going to go into a Cold War. He's saying like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem like what's happening. So maybe I should adjust the foreign policy of Australia. And I think that's correct. Number 19, Unproven Gem, Leo 14th, the Vatican.
Nice.
I knew you would
not
like
on
that
my
one.
list.
Not on your list. Oh,
not on my
there
list.
we go.
Not on my
Excellent.
list.
Number 18, Friedrich Merz. Quite frankly, Friedrich Merz, I mean, he's on your list as 27th just because you don't know. I put him at 18. Quite frankly, I think we will both be proven to have not picked him high enough. I think so far what I've seen is, quite frankly, really, really impressive. Number 17, Mark Carney. He gets a nod over Merz just because I think it's more difficult for him than for Merz. But doing very well. We talked a couple of episodes before about structural reforms going on in Canada. He has just submitted the One Canada bill legislation that is going to break down barriers between provinces, and I do believe that is going to pass. And I think that Canada will finally be, like all other countries on the planet, a federal entity, which it hasn't been thus far. So that is actually enormous. I mean, some studies show that if they actually get that through, Canadian economy will benefit massively. Like, it will grow like a whole percent higher because of those reforms. And then finally, this is going to be maybe a controversial pick, maybe not. Ahmed al-Shara.
That's a great pick. I left him off. He was in my honorable mentions because I think he's very speculative. Like you might have found Nikola Jokic, or you might have found I don't know, insert some other European player that didn't make it that got drafted that way. But what he's done so far is very, very impressive.
Well, what's impressive is this is the former basically Al-Qaeda aligned leader.
Not basically, like yes, he was Al-Qaeda.
He was Al-Qaeda, yes. What's interesting though about him and his family, and what makes me pause here, is that he's actually extremely well-educated person from a very educated family. So he is, I think he went to school for medicine. Yep. And he is married to somebody who comes from a very prominent political family that has very deep roots in Syria, in the elites. So his father was also a prominent, I think, member of previous governments. So this is not somebody that just picked up an AK-47 off like a farm and joined Al-Qaeda. This is somebody who was frustrated with what was going on in his country, very well educated, and fought against Assad. And of course, the easiest way to get resources and weapons at the time was to join Al-Qaeda or join its various offshoots. So thus far, just an incredible, savvy understanding of PR and marketing. I mean, he scored an interview with, Amanpour on CNN. He looks great in a suit. He is hedging a lot of different risks, Sharia law, this, that. Israel, Iran, the only country in the entire region that was very quiet about it. And I think that it's been a very impressive performance. Of course, the problems are what has been released over the last couple of days. There's now evidence of sectarian violence against the Alawites. I mean, he needs to crush that ASAP if he's going to remain on this list. But I've got him at 16.
Or he just needs to crush all the Alawites. I'm not sure the Alawites have long to go in Syria. They had their time in the sun, led by a pretty brutal series of dictators. Leo the 14th, not on my list. I don't think anyone would trade a White Sox fan for any of these other leaders going on here.
Wow!
Oh, shots fired.
That was the problem with Leo. Not the advancing age, or But listen, if you can survive the conclave of the Cardinals and the backstabbing that happens there. You know what I mean? Like, you're good. And I don't know. We'll see. But I threw him in there because you and I have a great affinity to talk about in inner workings of the Vatican. So I figured, why not?
Yeah, why not? Merz would have been higher for me, except that, that thing where he didn't get elected chancellor on the first vote, that was sort of like J.R. Smith calling timeout in game one of that. Know how many timeouts you have, man. That's like a basic fundamental task of how you're going to do these things. If you can't do so maybe he'll be great, and I appreciate that he's working against constraints here, but he got penalized for me. Both Albanese and Carney are higher up on this list.
Oh, wow. I'm glad. I was worried. I was very, very self-conscious about putting Albanese here. Because I thought you were going to make fun of me, and I also expected you to really shit all over my Mark Carney pick and call me a homer. So I may have even brought him lower just because I was self-conscious and afraid of being made fun of.
No, I think Carney's okay. I think he's got a tough job ahead of him. I think that caving on that digital services tax shows you just that Canada doesn't have a lot of options, and that his job is going to be to make the best deal possible he can with Donald Trump in the United States without completely bending over backwards. So he's got a high degree of difficulty. But if you're thinking about, would you trade your current leader for somebody like Mark Carney? He's higher up for me, because I think you can, if you start thinking about it that way, I think there are a lot of countries in the world would be like, yeah, I'll take that guy. He seems pretty smart, good hand on the wheel. So
let's explain what we mean by that. I mean, central bankers come and go, right? But having a smooth, sophisticated, and yet comfortable with being in a small town central banker, there is only one of one. Mario Draghi, maybe the best dressed person on the planet. Mario Draghi may be the highest IQ person on the planet, but I don't think that Mario Draghi would have been as comfortable in a small Canadian town discussing junior hockey as Mark Carney. And that's because he actually was born in Northwestern Territories, not even a province. It's pretty much like Arrakis as far as you're concerned, or hot, more appropriately, climactically. And so he does have small town appeal and ability to actually seem genuine and authentic. And that's really a difficult combination to both be a macroeconomics nerd and have that authenticity.
Well, and really understands the Anglosphere, understands Canada deeply, understands the UK deeply, I think understands the United States deeply. He's, in that sense, he has a deep knowledge of where he comes from and is able to balance some of these pressures against each other. So yeah, I have no problems with Carney whatsoever. I still think he's not governing a future superpower, but we don't have to take you through the coals for that. All right, well, my next category goes from 24 to 21. And I didn't really have it as unproven gems. This is really just another grab bag of leaders that I thought sort of belonged together.
That's okay. Yeah.
But anyway, so at 24, I have Prabowo in Indonesia. This is a guy who has changed his stripes many different times. He was a military, or really, an assistant to a military dictator, did some human rights violations, stayed around though for decades, eventually makes a deal to become vice president with Jokowi. Now he's finally the president, showing off some of his negative qualities and making the biggest cabinet in Indonesia's history and all the pork barrel spending and everything else. But hey, you get points for sticking around for decades in both a military dictatorship and a democracy. I think somebody who knows how to get power, how to exert power, and how to survive. So I'll take him there. He might get pushed down lower. Some of his early returns on his first.
Well, that's the thing.
Couple months in power.
If I could just interject, I thought about it. I thought about it. It's just that it's just so hard to follow Joko Widodo.
It is.
And if Joko Widodo was here, I don't really have honorable mentions, to be honest with you, Jacob. I have some that don't make the list and that I think are terrible. But many people think they're good. But I have this kind of I wish they were still in charge. I have a man crush on Mario Draghi. What? Sue me. And I kind of had a man crush on Joko Widodo. think the man did amazing stuff and brought Indonesia to the map. So now I just, it's kind of like when all these basketball players were kind of promoted by the NBA as the next Michael Jordan, I ended up not liking them. Like, I was not a Vince Carter fan, and not just because he stabbed Toronto Raptors in the back, but I just didn't like him because the PR machine tried to make him the next Michael Jordan, and I just don't think the Provovo is anywhere close to Joko Widodo. So anyways,
He's not. And Jokowi did a great job. But to extend your metaphor to a really painful extent, Jokowi reminds me of, I remember late 90s, still, Sports Illustrated was still a thing. And I vividly remember the cover of Sports Illustrated when they were like, Jerry Stackhouse, the next Michael Jordan. I think Jerry Stackhouse is Jokowi in this metaphor. Like, everybody was like, and he had a fine career, but like he didn't actually fundamentally change things. Like, I don't think that, I think that now that he's gone, like, his imprint will not stand the test of time. And that's because Indonesia is impossible. Indonesia, by all, is not really a nation state. All the different languages, all the different ethnicities, all of the, it's literally a bunch of islands that are strung together in some kind of strange federal structure, like really, really high degree of difficulty. So if Jokowi were around, we up him, but, failed to leave his imprint. The next two are going to be controversial for me. They're boring. And I'm sure our leaders from New Zealand and the UK will say there's no way that you should have these leaders here. But again, we're talking about, would you trade these leaders for what I currently have? And if you start putting yourself in the shoes of people in Equatorial Guinea or Guatemala, well, actually, I shouldn't say Guatemala, but, some of these up Nicaragua, like, you would trade for these people in a heartbeat. So Christopher Luxon in New Zealand, you get 23, and Keir Starmer, 22. Just competent. They're fine. They're not going to break things. They're not going to change things, but just fine, competent leadership that you would trade if you had sort of a bad time. And then coming in at 21, I have Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. And I think that he has showed himself to be a pretty adept politician. I think he has dealt with Trump correctly. He's in an impossible situation in South Africa and has played the game relatively well. And I think he has, reformist desires, but he's sort of crippled by the ANC and some of their dysfunction. But he's got a very, very hard job, and he's doing a decent job considering the challenges that he has in front of him.
Do you want to go on, or shall we stop here for you?
We can go on, whatever you want. You're the MC.
Yeah,
I'm happy to go on.
Yeah, why don't you complete it? Because, I'm at 15 now, so why don't you go to your next...
Okay. My next list, 20 through 15 here. This, what was the name of this category for you?
Well, I think we've kind of moved away from that. For me, it was Diamonds Under Pressure, but...
Okay. Yeah, for me, this was sort of the same thing, but more like tragic flaw. Like, these countries are really lucky to have these guys, but they have some flaw that just makes it, like you would trade them if you could get a better offer. So coming in at 20 is Lula da Silva in Brazil.
Ooh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
First huge disagreement.
Because you've got him higher up, or because you've got him lower down?
Because, I don't have him at all. You
don't have him at all. Ooh,
no,
I think that's a mistake, and our Brazilian listeners will call you out for it. The things that Lula has done over his career are absolutely extraordinary. He has survived incredible things. He's at the end of the rope, so maybe, I penalized him. He would have been further up if this was young Lula, but he's done incredible things for Brazil.
If this was first term Lula, he would have been top 5. I'm hanging down the phone. I completely agree with you, but this is like picking This is like picking LeBron James in the top 20 trade value. He puts up the stats, but you're looking at $56 million, 39-year-old playing on knees they have gone around the world 3 times, Hey,
LeBron's still pretty good. I think it was on Zach Lowe's podcast where they were rumoring, the Knicks might trade Anunoby and Bridges and something else to
That's
get
my
LeBron.
point.
LeBron can still take you places.
Anunoby and Bridges for LeBron James. Come on,
wonderful player. Anyway, I'll take Lula. I like. He's got a tragic flaw. Like, he could never, most of Brazil's Congress is center right. Like, his dream of Brazil hasn't necessarily come to pass. But I think he's been a skilled leader. Yeah,
Jacob, this is the way I see it. Tupac Shakur's career really goes pre-jail, post-jail. Pre-jail, he's writing basically American poetry, right? Changes. Dear Mama, My Letter to the President, just fascinating. Post-jail, some of that stuff is full of just smoke and anger, and it comes out of the gut, but it's hit them up. It's not really, it's not poetry. And so Lula, to me, is same as Tupac. There's pre-jail Lula, disposed Lula, and I think jail changed him, man. I think he just became a bitter populist, and that's just. I think that Brazil will be very lucky to get rid of him in the next election. But and again, that is not to say that I disagree with anything you said. Absolute survivor, and his first term, like almost flawless. Although he was riding the coattails of the commodity bull market, nonetheless, I agree with you on that. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, no. And I often say that Brazil reminds me the most of any country in the world that reminds me of the United States in terms of its politics. Brazil reminds me of the United States the most.
Yes.
And there's an arc here where Lula becomes the Joe Biden of Brazil, and where Mr. Bolsonaro is waiting in the wings. But if we had been talking about Biden like before it was obvious that he was senile, like 2021 version of Biden, like that, I think that's sort of where I'm going here. But anyway, rounding up this section for me. So at 19. I hate having him here, but I don't think we can avoid Mr. Viktor Orban, who has been in power for quite some time. He is certainly not a liberal, but I think also the opposition in Hungary has demonized him to an incredible extent. He's been ahead on lots of different things when it comes to geopolitics. I think he's very, very smart, an excellent tactician. And he's played the game very well. In terms of geopolitics, he saw the world being multipolar well before I was talking about multipolarity. Viktor Orban was preparing for multipolarity, so he gets some props for me there. But he's fundamentally a liberal. Like there are places, there are countries that he just can't go to because he cannot brook dissent. He's got that authoritarian instinct in him, so he's got that tragic flaw. 18, you can feel the vibe of this category now. Benjamin Netanyahu. Another incredible tactician, a politician's politician. Nobody better at the footwork, like can do it all. He can do the right hand, the left hand. He's got the jump hook. He's got the 3-point shot, everything else, and yet cares more about himself than his own country. And cares more about his own survival than anything else. And that narcissism, like it makes him such a great politician, and he can position his country, especially a country like Israel, which is polarized and divided. Like he can be a North Star for that type of country, but like a deep tragic flaw. I
think my comp for him in basketball terms would probably be Gilbert Arenas, honestly. There you go.
Yeah. Right down to bringing the gun to the locker room and toting it around. We've got to get Iran, guys. This is why I've got the gun in the locker room.
Yeah, ruining basically, what's his name? Critteran's career? Critteran?
Javaris. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. He went to Georgia Tech. I remember that. So shout out Georgia Tech.
Well done,
at 17, Javier Millet.
Okay.
I assume based on what you said that he's higher up for you, but maybe not that much higher up. Again, I asked ChatGPT for a little help here in sort of what the scouting report would be, and it spit back out to me, Crypto Ron Paul meets Steve Jobs, which I thought was pretty
Whoa, Steve Jobs! Whoa! Wait, time out. Relax.
Yeah, but like, and I wanted to punish him a little bit because I think his winning power was actually more a function of Argentinians just being fed up. And they were looking for the craziest thing possible. And so they picked the craziest thing possible. But like early returns, he's shown himself to be much more pragmatic than his dead dog communing, chainsaw wielding MO would suggest. I really didn't like that weird crypto scam that he was a part of or got taken for a ride for. Like that was a negative signal for me. And I think we're about to get into the tough times for him. But I'm interested enough that he's there at 17. At 16, Mr. Erdogan, we've already talked about you, Mr. Sultan, so we don't have to do more there. And at number 15, the top of this list, again, lucky to have him, but we've got some kind of tragic flaw here. This also is about, future projecting. Narendra Modi comes in right here at 15 for me. If this were first term Modi, he's maybe untouchables. Like he's maybe at the very, very top of this list, but we're in a third term. We're getting old. Have we built something beyond Modi's charisma that allows the BJP to go forward? I don't know. He was very ambitious about his reforms. Not a whole heck of a lot have gone through. Some of them have. Like we've harmonized taxes and we've done some good things, but like others, we really haven't made progress on. So I think he's MVP level player, but we're in the twilight of our career and we haven't quite gone through some of the things that we thought that some people that need to be this high on the list would be. So he comes in at 15 for me.
So if I was to take a pause here and think about this, I'm very surprised. We don't have much disagreement at our bottom, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So like in the bottom 7, we don't have that much disagreement. Okay, I didn't have Prabowo, I didn't have Sisi or Ali in Ethiopia. So, but like Azerbaijan, Germany, France, Rwanda, similarly on my end, I mean, okay, fine. Luka Doncic in Slovenia. Sorry, Robert Golob. Tusk and Christensen, you don't have. But
Not yet.
yeah, but there was a lot of agreement, I think, at the bottom.
Yeah.
I actually
I also just wanted to say I forgot to say this, like, because we did say that approval ratings mattered here. Narendra Modi has the highest approval rating of all the different leaders, so he's got 77%. Millet at 62%. Albanese has a 54% approval rating, so I over-indexed him for there as well. So there's a couple here that got boosts for me based on that.
So I actually, now that you've run off these, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I've got Modi, Erdogan, Millet. I have Ramaphosa. He's coming up. Mm-hmm. I don't have UK, New Zealand, Brazil, Hungary, and Israel. I mean, no offense to the Anglosphere. I think, time will tell. I just wasn't particularly impressed. I guess I chose Albanese instead of Starmer, quite frankly. Kind of both came at the same time. So I think Albanese's job is tougher, quite frankly, but we'll see. Lula, I disagree a lot. And then Bibi and Victor, I get it. Especially in Orban's case, I feel like I should have had him in the top 30. So I think you're right. But on Bibi, you're absolutely right. Just he puts up incredible statistics. He's an all-star. He is got the max contract, but he is a chemistry killer and he is a team cancer. And what I mean by that is that I think that everything that Netanyahu has done over the last, 5 years is ultimately going to, it's going to be something that Israel will be paying for a very long time. So I definitely vociferously disagree with that. But that's okay. That's good. Let's go to the next category. Okay, so this is where I think our disagreements. No. I think actually you're going to agree with a lot of these. Number 15 for me is Eddie Rama. This is a deep take, my friend.
Deep take, yeah.
Yes, leader of Albania. Okay, and yes, someone born in Serbia has picked an Albanian leader as top 15. That's a head nod to all our Armenian friends who are going to be mad at us about Aliyev. Just like, hey, if I can pick Eddie Rama, you guys can chill with Aliyev. Great navigation of a complicated region. Has found new sources of economic prosperity for Albania, particularly tourism, just like exploding. It's like what Portugal was like 5-10 years ago. That's Albania today. Very well done. And the other thing is that has great relationship with everyone in the region, including with Serbia. Like really well done, and has completed more EU chapters than Serbia. So closer to integration than a country that's, like objectively speaking, just far more modern economically and from an industrial perspective. Albania started off much worse in 1990 at the collapse of communism than Serbia. I mean, like much worse. They weren't even aligned with the Soviet bloc. Their only ally was like Maoist China. So really well done, really impressed. And by the way, this category for me is diamonds under pressure. So I'm picking a lot of leaders who have done something with nothing. So there's Eddie Rama. Then Cyril Ramaphosa. I have him here. So he's 14 for me, and he is 21 for you. So pretty much, we're in alignment there.
Yeah.
13. This is controversial. All of our liberal listeners will hate me for it. Although, quite frankly, you picked Bibi and Orban. So, give me a break, right?
If our liberal listeners are going to hate us for that, there's worse to come, guys.
There's worse to. Oh, yes, there is. There's absolutely worse to come. Nayib Bukele.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great.
Look, PR value alone, like El Salvador, we're talking about a guy. We're openly discussing somebody who's in charge of El Salvador, and not because of some terrible civil war. So that's number one. Second, everyone who's from Central America and Latin America that I know and that has been to El Salvador or lived there basically argues that country was absolutely unlivable before Bukele, and he has solved that with brutality, absolutely, but also ruthless efficiency. And then, perfect man for the era. He linked his country to BTC, to Bitcoin at 40,000. Doesn't look so stupid anymore. He wears futuristic caudillo suits, as my dear friend Juan Correa, shout out to him, because he definitely agreed with this pick, would say. And ultimately, I think I think there's too much indexing on what he's done on Bitcoin. I think not enough indexing on what he's done on crime. And if you don't like Trump, and so you don't like the fact that he is so pro-Trump, just look at it this way. I mean, he picked the right winner. And being a leader of a Central American country ultimately comes down to being on the right side of the United States of America, because it's it's the elephant in the room. So I think he's done very well. I've got Millet.
Hold on, wait. I want to pause you right there, Marco, because I don't want to step on this too much, but we should say that Nayib Bukele is number one on my list. He is untradeable. He is the top of he is the apex for me.
Wow. I mean, hey, listen. I don't disagree. His use of media, PR, reveals a deep knowledge of where the world is going. And yeah, man, I mean, again, if he can put El Salvador on the map.
He got rid of crime in El Salvador. Period. Like who else is doing that? You think El Salvador is trading anyone for Bukele on this list? No, they're very happy with the guy who gave them their country back and allowed them to walk in the streets again.
Wow. Yeah, my dear friend Juan, he's the head of asset allocation at BCA Research, and also my co-owner of the Californication basketball team in the JBL Fantasy League. He picked him number one too. And I respect Juan so much so that we share a basketball franchise in the Dreamland universe that is the Fantasy Sports League. So well done.
All right.
Sorry. I got Millet number 12. I think he's been amazing. Unbelievable charisma. He managed to get the Argentinians to agree with tightening your belts. Your point about Argentina was at this point anyways, that's true. But he's also managed to do it in a correct sequence by not opening up the capital account too quickly, which was very important. Making sure that the reforms first take hold and then discussing about lessening capital controls, something that Macri got wrong. So Macri got the sequencing wrong. Number 11, Abdullah II of Jordan. The degree of difficulty, degree of difficulty for a leading Jordan right now is absolutely insane. This is like a basketball player that just pulls his crappy team into the playoffs as the 7th seed all by himself. And quite frankly, the security of Israel is more tied to Abdullah II's leadership of Jordan than to what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, quite frankly. So Israelis should praise him for his cool and collected demeanor. That yes, it's become rhetorically increasingly anti-Israeli, but you have to sympathize for him, as we have talked about before. So that's my number 11.
All right. My next list takes me from 14 to 7. So this is a big one. And for me, I thought of this category as I'm hanging up, but not right away. Like I'm going to listen for a little bit and then I'm going to hang up. So some of these are rising stars. Some of these are high functioning technocrats. Some of these are elite lieutenants. And I think the ones that will be most controversial are 14 and 13, because the rest are ones that we've mostly already talked about. At 14, Shavkat Mirziyoyev of Uzbekistan. This is where I'm going to go like really deep. I'm going to cut really deep here. But this is a guy who took over for one of the most retrograde dictatorships in the post-Soviet world, and he has not made it a democracy, but he has opened up and liberalized Uzbekistan to a degree that nobody thought possible. He's been able to keep Uzbekistan out of the clutches of Islamic fundamentalism and everything else. He has not gone too far down the road with Russia or with China or with the United States. He has played all these things very well. I was in Tashkent in 2019. Everybody there was, of course, going to make it seem like they loved him. But everyone I talked to from Uzbekistan, when they think about Karimov before and Mirziyoyev now, they're like, he's great. We love him. He's competent. My Uber driver to JFK Airport 2 weeks ago was from Uzbekistan. And when I asked him about Shavkat Mirziyoyev, first he was like, I can't believe you know who that is. And let me tell you how great he is. We are so happy to have a competent leader at the head of the Uzbekistan state. So that's where
That's important. That's an important empiric. Yeah.
Yeah. 13, my bias is getting involved here, but I'm a really big fan of Shigeru Ishiba in Japan.
Interesting.
I have a soft spot for him. I talked to our friend Tobias Harris, not the basketball player, but the great Japan analyst, and talked about Ishiba as sort of a tragic heroic figure who's going to pursue something and not get there, but that will make him all the more of a Japanese hero because of it. Yeah, I like his policies and I like what he's trying to do. I'll also say, like, he came in a minority government with really, really low approval ratings, but he's getting stuff done and his approval ratings are slowly ticking up. So if he inherits this mess in Japanese politics and takes it to a position where he's in charge and he's pushing back against the United States in the trade war and he's trying to figure out the balance between China and the United States and what's going on with Taiwan, like a very, very high degree of difficulty. And I think he's doing a great job. And then the rest of rounding up this list. Here is Mette Frederiksen at 12.
Oh, okay.
Here is at 11. We've got I don't know how to pronounce her name actually, but it's the leader of Estonia, Kaja. I don't know.
Kaja.
You know? Anyway, I don't know, but she comes in here as well. I had your Swiss leader at number 10. Again, I went to ChatGPT for this, and they described her as Switzerland's Popovich. That sounded pretty good to me. That was enough to convince me that she belongs there. But I take your point that that's sort of a boring pick. Anyway, but I had her there at 10, and then Albanese at 9, Carney at 8, and Lawrence Wong coming in at number 7. So all countries that I think have high degrees of difficulty, really, really skilled leadership. Some of them are technocrats, some of them are rising stars, some of them just know how to do things, but all people that, you'll listen about trading, but ultimately, like, you're going to look at what you got and be like, I'm pretty good. I don't think I need to make a trade here because this person has got the situation under control.
Yeah, so Singapore, Canada, and Australia 7, 8, 9. Interesting. Switzerland 10, Estonia 11. Yeah, it was tough for me to give these countries that put them that high because they're just such well-run countries. It goes back to that Warren Buffett quote: "I want to invest in countries that even an idiot could run." So, to what extent does it matter who's in charge of them? But I think it's fair. I mean, I have 3 of them there. I don't have Estonia and Switzerland, but I don't disagree. Japan is interesting. We started doing this a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have updated my list because the way that Japanese trade negotiations with U.S. have gone is very interesting and suggests to me that you are right. There is something in Ishiba that's really interesting. I mean, they've really played hardball to the extent that I think no other country really has.
Yeah, and so and his approval ratings were in the toilet a month ago. He is slowly starting to crawl out of the base.
Super respect all of that, and I think that you picked somebody who's had a tough time and their real potential. I agree with you. Uzbekistan, I thought about it actually, shockingly, but I picked somebody else in the region. Okay. I picked somebody else, and I'll get to that because he's very high up on my list. Right. So I respect that. I just didn't think that 2 Central Asian countries really made sense. It was like 2 stands. Like, come on, guys. And if you count Azerbaijan as sort of like part of that whole post-Soviet space, it would have been a little bit too much and weird. So I hat tip to you. I think you picked really well.
All right, close it out.
Let's close it out, my friend. Number 10, Pedro Sanchez, Spain. I think we're going to disagree on this. We talked about it.
We are. ChatGPT kept on saying, do you want Pedro Sanchez on your list? And I kept saying, no, ChatGPT, get this Spanish incompetent guy off of my list. I don't want him. Tell me why he's there.
Well, look, I mean, you haven't heard anything about separatism in Spain for a while. And I think that's important. I think he's carved out a very bold foreign policy, led on Israel in a way that obviously nobody who is pro-Israel is going to like, but differentiated Spanish foreign policy for the first time since like the 80s. So that was interesting as well. And then ultimately the economy is extremely successful, is absolutely crushing the region. So he is high on my list. Now, is it because of him? The economy, no, but he hasn't gotten in the way. And that is important, especially in Europe. So he is very high on my list just because Spain is the best performing economy effectively in the Euro area. And then we get into 4 names I feel like you're not going to agree with based on our previous discussions. Let's put it this way. Think of us as different coaching systems. You might be modern, spread offense where you just want to do layups and 3-pointers and you believe in analytics. And I'm an old school guy who wants a post play. So I'm going to go.
I'm more like the triangle offense, and I want the guy with the drum in the corner and the peace pipe. I want to do Phil Jackson's version of coaching. That's me, right?
That's you. Okay. Well, I'm going with like just old school like post players. These guys are not in favor. No one is going to probably agree with this. But if you go to any one of these countries, just like your example with Uzbekistan, you go to any of these countries, you're going to find nothing but support. And yes, maybe that's because people who don't support them are in jail. Maybe. But I would say it's genuine.
Some people need to be in jail,
All right. Number 9. So this is top 10. Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Said. Oman. Oman, baby.
You love Oman, yeah.
Transformation of the country is stunning. I mean, we're talking a country that, didn't have basic services. Like, they needed to hire like accountants to set up its sovereign wealth fund. And it's really harder to find a smaller country that's doing more for global peace. It's hosted a number of negotiations between other powers, not because they're just a nice beachside location, but because they've made an effort to improve the situation in the Middle East. Then after that, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, UAE, transformed the country into what it is today. Incredible effort. It used to just be oil and tourism in Dubai. It's not just that anymore. It's starting to rival Hong Kong and Singapore as the alternative for emerging market financial capital flows. Abu Dhabi is absolutely exploding as a financial capital. There's advanced manufacturing in the country. Do you know that? They make airplane parts. It's part of the supply chain. It has AI advances. It's becoming a very, very interesting place. And you mentioned something about city-states in a couple of episodes. Like this is interesting. And the application of AI in UAE is going to be very, very dramatic and I think quite interesting. So UAE makes my 8th spot. Then this is where all the liberals that are listening, that are still here, for all you liberals listening, just remember, Jacob Shapiro picked Orban, okay?
But yeah, and I'm also not saying I'm not saying I want to live under the thumb of these guys. We're just talking about in the abstract, like who would you trade leaders for? I'm not trying to live under Nayib Bukele, even though he's number 1 on the list.
I genuinely would pick up the phone and trade our leader of any country for Mohammed bin Salman. Detente with Iran. Just said, you know what? I just really don't care about the Shia-Sunni split, bro. So you can have whatever you want because I care about the socio-economic reorientation of the entire country. We've talked about this before. He might be number 1 on my list, but I do think the Khashoggi affair was a huge own goal. But since then, I mean, if you look at where Saudi Arabia was in 2015 on any number of indicators and where it is today, it is absolutely night and day. It was practically defenseless. It was mired in endless wars, stuck in a fundamentalist doom loop. The country has been absolutely transformed. And what I like about it is that he has big dreams. Like Biggie. He's got big dreams. Is he going to accomplish them? Yeah, probably not. But when your North Star is actually a big dream, you might get 30% of it and still improve the country. And you know what? Who has big dreams anymore on our list? Tell me who the dreamers are. What's Benjamin Netanyahu's dream other than not going to jail? So Mohammed bin Salman, very high on my list.
Benjamin Netanyahu's dream, by the way, he you're forgetting Ice Cream Gate, where he got held up on corruption issues because his office was spending over the equivalent of $400 a month just on specialty ice cream for his wife. So he dreams of ice cream and bombing Iran. There you go.
That's awesome. well done. And then number 6, it's interesting that I took this leader over Mohammed bin Salman. You could say that the degree of difficulty and the delta in Saudi Arabia is greater, but I'm picking King Mohammed VI of Morocco, plus his prime minister, Aziz Akhanouche. The socioeconomic transformation of Morocco is also incredible. Avoided the Arab Spring, but it's really the integration into the supply chains that is very important. And there is, I think, some symmetry of having Morocco 6 and Spain 10, because they're increasingly becoming really Europe's manufacturing hub. The integration between the two is quite interesting. Also, this is a country that's effectively doubled its territory. if you want to compare King Mohammed VI to Vladimir Putin's got nothing on annexation because Morocco has effectively quietly annexed Western Sahara and absolutely nobody has said anything. Now, that's been the case for a very long time, but it's pretty much now over and it's fait accompli. Also, a great place to visit and has really navigated a lot of the problems of the last 25 years. I think Morocco is where the rest of the GCC is headed, and that's why you should be very bullish on the Middle East. So I'm going to stop here, and then, any reactions, any thoughts?
We're closer than you think. This is why we're cousins. On my list, I like you. The 4 leaders so far that you have that I should have had: Anwar Ibrahim, Abdullah II, Idi Rama, and the Sultan of Oman. Whatever his name is, I don't know his name. Sorry, Sultan of Oman. I just remember Sultan Qaboos. I remember joking about him over back in our Stratford days. But I think all of those are worthy of inclusion. I'll give you my 7 through 1, and you'll see that I actually have taken both MBS and MBZ ahead of you, coming in at 3 and 4.
Wow!
Yeah, I know.
Oh, wow.
Surprising,
I'm shocked.
isn't it? You're shocked? I know. I talk a lot of shit about the Gulf here on this podcast, but here I am with those 2 at the very top. So rounding out my top 7 here, and then. Well, no, I have like 10 or 12 minutes. Maybe we get through the top, and do we come back and discuss this more after we've had time to study? I don't know. You'll tell me. Okay.
We do.
So number 7, this might be your number 1, but this is Georgia Maloney's territory for me. She comes in at number 7. I'm sure you're going to want to talk about her. I think she's been very, very effective. Number 6, Xi Jinping. I'm impressed. I've always liked Xi Jinping. I've always over-indexed on his leadership. I think he's done an incredible job with a very, very difficult situation. You want to talk about degrees of difficulty. I mean, he's the Mao Deng Xiaoping of this era. He's trying to absolutely transform China. He's gotten a long way there. He's reforming the PLA. He's moving supply side reforms. Like, nobody has a higher degree of difficulty on this list than Xi Jinping. And the fact that he's still alive and still kicking, and there's no opposition, don't listen to the annual spate of rumors that Xi Jinping is on the way out, which is happening this week. I guess we needed something in the slow news cycle after Israel-Iran war. Xi Jinping comes here. Number 5, this one I bet is not. Well, I don't know. Maybe she's on your list. Maybe she's not. Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, I think, has been incredibly impressive. I've described her as sort of the Angela Merkel of the 2020s. She reminds me of Angela Merkel. She's a scientist, engineer. Yes, she's taking over from AMLO's populism, but she's dealt with Trump masterfully. I think she's doing a great job with Mexican politics. Her approval ratings through the roof. Like, she's putting in good work. 3 and 4, I told you I've got MBZ at number 4, MBS at number 3. And my top 2, number 2, I wonder if you'll push back against this. And this is probably my bias creeping in, but give me Mr. Zelensky in Ukraine at number 2. What he's been able to do for Ukraine. He's gone through some ups and downs. He's still kicking. Ukraine is still here. Ukraine is in an incredible position because of him. I think that Ukraine is not here today in its current form if he's not out in the streets with the cameras, like manipulating the media the way that he did. Like, I think he really was an indispensable man at a really critical time for a country that was at existential risk, and I give him extra props for that. Maybe he's a Churchillian figure. Maybe as soon as the war's over, he gets put back out to pasture, or in this case, back onto TV as a comedian. I like that he's a comedian. Like, that works for me.
Agreed.
Also, a fellow, according to Putin, a Jewish fascist. So fine, like, let the Jew pick a Jewish fascist at number 2. And I've already told you that Nayib Bukele is my number 1. You can't resist it. I don't want to live under him. He's incredibly illiberal. I bet that 30 years from now, he's like, the metaphor might be Daenerys Targaryen, like, good intentions, did a whole bunch of things, but eventually lived long enough to be Queen of the Ashes. Like, he has that darkness to him. He's got the dragon inside of him. But right now, he's riding high, and nobody has done more with less than Bukele, right down to the Bitcoin bet. So there's my list.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of agreement here. We've got El Salvador, we've got UAE, Saudi Arabia, Italy, Mexico. I'm about to reveal my top 5. One disagreement I have here with you. So Ukraine, I have actually both Zelensky and Trump in a special category of their own.
As you can tell, by the way, Mr. Trump, not on my list. I was curious if he would get on your list.
He's not on my list either. I think that President Trump has done a lot of very impressive things, but is he a product of being the leader of the best? Like, could he have done what he did with El Salvador? That's the question that I think I struggle with. And similarly, Zelensky was an absolutely terrible leader before the war.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely terrible. So, and even during the war, I would say that the first 12 months of Zelensky's leadership in the war, from February 2022 to, let's say, September 2023, admirable, amazing. I think he's made several incredibly, terrifyingly terrible military
Yeah,
strategic decisions.
he
You
has.
know, for the past like 2 years straight. And so, like, you're basically giving him the number two spot for like 18 months of his rule.
I am.
And
I
it
am.
is, yeah, and listen, incredible 18 months of his rule. But like, that's like, I don't know what to do with him because of that.
Yeah,
It's sort
it's
of,
kind of like it's kind of like Brandon Roy. Like when he was on the floor, he was one of the best, but he doesn't have any knees. He has no cartilage in his knees, so he can't play basketball.
a better example would be somebody who catches fire in the playoffs and then gets a huge contract afterwards. And you're like, oh my God, look at what they did in these two series. Yeah, but maybe that's because they weren't guarding him. That's why he's not on my list, but I respect that 18 months of dogged perseverance. China, big disagreement with you there.
Not on your list.
No, no, Xi
Wow,
Jinping is not on
that's a
my list.
huge disagreement. Wow.
Well, and here's why. I loved what you said about Uzbekistan's president. Remind me of the name again.
Shavkat Mirziyoyev. I only had to practice that about 30 times before we hit record.
And I apologize for not remembering the name. I did honestly take a look at Uzbekistan as one of my potentials. Didn't choose it. But what you said was interesting. You talked to some random Uzbekistani taxi driver, and they loved him. And I bet you if you poll people in Uzbekistan legitimately, they would agree. I don't think that's the case with China, and here's why. He didn't take people out of poverty. Preceding leaders did. By 2012, China was what it is today. He unnecessarily provoked the sleeping giant, which is the United States of America. That was not necessary in 2012. You could have waited until 2020, 2025, 2030, when you have far more ability to kind of challenge the US. I think that was a huge own goal, Jacob. There was no need for China to start talking about 9-dash lines or South China Sea in 2012. It just, why? Why wake up the United States of America itching to pivot out of the Middle East? Why alert them to the fact that, yes, you have designs on regional hegemony? And then finally, I cannot believe you have him this high because of how he has crushed private sector dynamism in China. And I don't want to sound like some laissez-faire, like pro-business guy, who just cares about that. But that's something that China genuinely was crushing and was getting there. And some of his structural reforms, I mean, certainly he has put the weight of the government behind certain sectors. God bless you, but anybody can do that. My concern is that there's been a little bit too much opposition to private sector entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yeah, I'll push back in this way. I think the thing that we really disagree on is that I think that he is popular to the average rank and file Chinese person, and I think that not because he made them prosperous, but because he went after corruption. I think there was a huge
Fair.
divide where parts of China got incredibly
We
rich,
agree.
and he came in and said, "Boji Lai, the party's over." And you guys in Shanghai driving around the Lamborghinis while people are making less than $5 a day in the interior, the party's over. Like and military guys who you're siphoning off all this money, local governments who are doing all these things to siphon off money, that's over. The party is over. We're going back to moral rectitude and Xi Jinping principles and little red books and everything else. And I think that he's gotten popular for that. The others, I agree with you. I mean, I would quibble with, I don't think his problem was 2012. His problem was the wolf warrior diplomacy with 2017. And to his credit, has fixed it. He got rid of the wolf warriors. He's like taking it back. Now that was a mistake, but like he showed the ability to survive the mistake and twist it. Private sector dynamism, sure, but I think he's done as good a job as he possibly can in China. And I think he is the one that said, hey, get ready for L-shaped growth. We are going to have to go through this at some point. We're going to let the real estate bubble collapse.
I know, but even
there, have to manage it.
But even there, Jacob, he's making the same mistake that Angela Merkel, Obama, Tea Party, everyone in the West made. So I don't want to be too negative on this, but there is a solution to a real estate crisis. Richard Koo has told us what that is, and it's stimulating GDP growth. Now, he's falling into the same mistake everyone else did, but all he needs to do is look at the West and how long the deleveraging was prolonged because the US government and the European governments did not step in with fiscal support to know that he is making the same mistake. So on that front, I think the fact that he has been so austere is an incorrect move. But
Yeah, but I think that's because it's the right move for the Chinese context. He warned them in 2019, do not do this. This is a red line. I am not going to bail you out. And then they did it. And so he had to follow through and say, look, we are just not going to backstop you forever. We need to be more productive. Like, we need to be more
But
efficient
he's
with our
not
capital.
gonna right, but he's not going to be more productive if he's messing with also the private markets and private businesses and private entrepreneurship.
That's true. I have
So
I can't
listen,
argue with you there.
but it's not a big deal. He is on my list of like the people I left out, along with some others that we can talk about next time. I'm going to finish off my list. This has
Yep.
gone on long enough. The next one, first of all, if you have any reactions to our lists, send them to us.
Yes.
You can use Marko at geopoliticalalpha.com or Jacob.
Jacob at jacobshapiro.com. I'll put them both in the intro, but yes.
Okay, so let's get some commentary. That's cool. We're also what I'm going to do, Jacob, is I'm going to use a sophisticated mathematical formula to blend our lists together.
Oh, cool.
So we'll know who's number one.
Great.
All right, I'm going to round off the top. I think you're going to love my top. First of all, number 5, Kasim Yomart Tokayev, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't choose Uzbekistan. Why? First of all, navigating geopolitics very successfully. The reason Uzbekistan can ride quietly and not pick sides is because nobody truly cares about Uzbekistan. Like, let's be very clear. Including Russians. They're like, whatever. Like, sure, yeah. Sorry for destroying your environment with cotton production. Moving on. Kazakhstan, the Russians care about Kazakhstan. They care about Kazakhstan. And so do the Chinese. And yet, what Tokayev has managed to do is perhaps the greatest balancing act in all of the world. Yes, I'm going to go that far. He managed to call in Russian peacekeepers when there was to quell an uprising against him.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, he has managed to avoid picking sides in Ukraine, Russia, which is extraordinary. He has left the ruling party, completely pivoted away from Nazarbayev, positioning himself as a political economic reformer. He's refused to recognize Russian puppet states in Ukraine, refused to accept the all sorts of domestic political problems in Russia that have sort of moved over to Kazakhstan, and just managed to get rid of domestic political problems that have been left over from Nazarbayev, managed to balance both China and Russia as well. So really impressive work there in Kazakhstan that nobody's probably paying attention to. I would definitely trade a leader of many countries for Tokayev. Number 4 hasn't made your list, which is surprising. This is the best economic performance in Europe. I said Spain. There is another country that's doing even better. The largest budget deficit consolidation in human history. We're talking about Kyriakos Mitsotakis of Greece. Also, geopolitically, quiet, hasn't really pushed against Turkey, quietly become the destination for Israeli entrepreneurs and capital, has moved into Greece a lot, and really interesting performance. I think that, absolutely would trade many leaders for Mitsotakis. Also, third term. Which is very impressive in a place like Greece. I have Modi third. I regret it. I regret it though. I think I mean, just you made such a compelling case for why he shouldn't be number 3. He is for you number 15. I think that's correct. I overstated him. And then finally, we get to our top 2 choices, who will be ranked number 1 and 2 on our lists. So I nailed it, mainly because you also agree. Yours, 6 and 4. And it's very interesting. The top 2 leaders in the world for Jacob, Shapiro, and Marko Papic are women. Number 2, Claudia Sheinbaum. Absolutely crushing it.
I'm so happy she's number 2 for you. I'm so impressed with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And number 1, the greatest leader in the world. And she will be confirmed. No, I'm sorry. But if she will be confirmed, once they do the math, it will work out because she is number 6 for you. She's number 1 for me. Maybe Sheinbaum actually goes higher, 4 and 2. Oh, this is going to be interesting. No.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
Claudia Sheinbaum will be crowned number 1. She's number 2 for me. For me, number 1 and will be crowned number 2 overall is just an absolute legend. Giorgia Maloney. Crushed it. just, I mean, mic drop in every way, shape, or form, from her facial expressions when she's dealing with chauvinistic, overburdening, annoying men, down to the economic performance of Italy, down to the way that she has completely dampened populism in the country. She's given the anti-establishment populists what they wanted, which is anti-immigration policies, and then she has pursued a pretty solid economic agenda. Nobody talks about the fact that Italy still has huge debt burden because the deficit has absolutely shrunk. Well done, Giorgia Maloney. You are number one on the list. But I can just see the data right now, and it looks like Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is crowned the best leader in the world, with Maloney second. So that's 1 and 2, two leaders, two female leaders in G20 countries. So that's very interesting. I will complete the mathematical consolidation of our two lists. And in the next episode, what we're going to do, Jacob, is we're going to basically go from 1 to about 50. I think we got about 50 leaders here because, you know, you had some that I didn't have and vice versa. And then we're going to talk about those that we've left out, why we left them out, namely Donald Trump. We're going to get a lot of hate mail, which is great. Let's go.
Let's go.
And then the second thing
we left out Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Gabriel Boric was also on my honorable mention list. But yes, we'll get into it.
That's fair. We'll get into all of that. And also, yeah, I mean, we're gonna ask ourselves, would we really trade these people? But I gotta say, Sheinbaum and Maloney, yeah, I mean, I think I would trade the leaders of our country for those.
I would be happy to live under the two of them. That's fine with me.
All right. On that note, we're gonna end our top trade list part 1. Part 2 is coming soon, hopefully early next week, when we can kind of digest some of the feedback and go into the definitive list. That is the mind belt of both of us.
This was incredible, cousin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate all the hard work.